Okay, through you, Mr. Mayor, we are now live.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Campo. So good evening, members of council, staff, invited guests, and the general public. Welcome to our regular council meeting of Tuesday, April the 6th. I have a motion moved by Sam McDonnell, second by Lyle Warden. Be resolved that the April 6, 2021 council meeting of the Township of South Glengarry now be opened at 7 p.m. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. I would ask everyone to please rise for the playing of our national anthem. Mrs. Campo, if you would please. Okay, thank you, Mrs. Campo. I do have a motion moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Martin Lang. Be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry approve the agenda. Is there any additions to the agenda, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there are no additions. However, there's a couple of items that have been requested to be moved into other business from information only. Those being item 7D4, the letter from the Ontario Recreation Facilities Association, as well as 7D8, the resolution regarding carbon tax.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other additions from members of council? So we'll move those from out of information purposes only to other business. So it'll be item number 2 and item number 3. So the motion will be as amended. You heard the motion, all in favor. The motion's carried. Thank you. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or their nature thereof? Not seeing none. I do have one myself. Just give me a sec here if I can. My apologies. I do have one in regards to the closed session part of the meeting. I will disclose a conflict of interest in regards to the closed session being part of staff report 53-2021. It's sale of land that's listed with a company that I'm part owner of. So I will declare conflict of interest at that point. I'll ask Deputy Mayor, Mr. Warden, to take that portion of the closed session. Okay, thank you. And so we'll move to number 5, approval of the minutes. I have a motion moved by Lyle Warden, second by Sam McDonnell. Be resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of the Council of the Township of South Glengarry held on March 15, 2021, including the closed session minutes, be adopted as circulated. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. I have a motion moved by Martin Lang, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be resolved that the minutes of the public meeting of Council of the Township of South Glengarry held on March 15th, 2021 be adopted as circulated. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. And I have a motion moved by Sam McDonnell, second by Martin Lang. Be resolved that the minutes of the special meeting of Council of the Township of South Glengarry held on March 30th, 2021, including the closed session minutes, be adopted as circulated. All in favor of the motion? Motion's carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to number 6. We'll go right into presentation and delegations. Up, we have the roads need study, Greer Galloway Consulting. We have Kevin and Rob with us this evening. So I will hand it over to you two gentlemen, unless Chris has something ahead of that.
Yes, I do, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Tonight, in 2020, we had Council approved a comprehensive road needs study to be completed. It's been completed as of March 21st of this year. It was performed by Greer Galloway Group from Kingston. And tonight we have with us Mr. Kevin Hawley and Mr. Rob Asselstein to present our findings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. LeBlanc. If you can go ahead, gentlemen.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I am going to screen share as I have a PowerPoint presentation, or as Kevin and I have a PowerPoint presentation for just to go over a summary of the report itself. A little bit more background on the report. The actual study itself was completed last November, and then there was some follow-up this spring where Chris and I both went over some of the roads that were reassessed and reevaluated. But yeah, I will see if I can figure out screen sharing, because I haven't used Zoom a lot. Everyone see that fine?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, so as mentioned, the study was completed last November. These assessments are point assessments, which means that we drive all of the roads. It is our opinion using a provincial guide, the condition of the roads at that time, which means the road condition can change. Obviously, as I mentioned, there were some roads that changed slightly, and those needed to be reevaluated this spring. And as I go through, if you have any questions, feel free to interject. There will be time at the end of the presentation for questions as well. Also, Kevin, if you feel that you would rather field any of the questions, please feel free to just take those at that time. So some background on the existing road infrastructure. There's a breakdown there of the existing surfaces for each type in the township. Pavement, there's approximately 154 kilometers. Surface treatment, around 84 kilometers, and gravel, 146 kilometers. It's a pretty typical distribution for a primarily rural township. Most of the roads are low AGT, which means is a representative number of traffic volume. So it's
the average daily.
Yeah, it's your daily average traffic volume. Another characteristic of the township's roads is that they're quite often adjacent to agricultural land, and they have good existing ditching, especially the roads that are the higher traffic volume roads. And another thing to add here, just because it seemed to be of interest in the feedback that we got earlier from the township, there's about 40 kilometers of the 383 kilometers of roads that are dead end roads, or about 10%, which is not particularly unusual. So the basis of review, there's a pretty extensive guide that we go through, and we assign essentially a rating to each road based on a number of sub-criteria. I'm not going to get into every single aspect that we look at because it is quite extensive. I will touch on some of the more important ones, or ones that are of more interest. So we look at the presence of substandard horizontal and vertical curves. And what I mean by that is based on the angle of the curve, the severity of it, and the posted speed limit, all we're looking for is the amount of curves that are suboptimal would the road be redesigned today. And in a lot of municipalities, these are sometimes existing conditions that are unavoidable. For example, if you have a really sharp curve in your road and it's posted at 80, that curve is likely there because there's an existing embankment or something that was difficult to build through at the time the road was built. So sometimes those things are hard to change, but they are things that we look for and that we indicate in the report. Another thing which is very, very important is the assessment of the existing drainage conditions. It's crucial to the longevity of any potential improvements that you may do. I can't really overstate that. There's no point in resurfacing a road if you haven't looked at the existing drainage and proven that you're content with the fact that it is good. They're not going to be drainage issues. You're going to get water away from your road and away from your base material. And we found that in our review that the existing drainage conditions were generally adequate throughout. There's some issues in the hamlets, and some of the lower traffic volume roads, which is not unusual. In the hamlets, quite often, there's not as much space, so it's hard to ditch. And you end up with some water that just kind of runs down the road. But most of the major roads, generally good ditching, not a lot of capped shoulders, which is another thing we see, which is where you get vegetation growth over the edge of the granular shoulder. And and then the other thing we look for really is surface deficiencies. These are the most obvious things that you or anyone else would see when you drive the road. We're looking for rutting in the existing surface, cracking, segregation, which is when the actual aggregates or stones are pulled out of the asphalt surface, distortion, potholes. And when I look for these surface deficiencies, we're looking primarily for deficiencies that could be indicative of base defects, which are alligator cracking, which is a series of network cracks. I'll show you a picture here in a second. Distortion, so big ups and downs in your roads, rutting in the wheel path. And these are important to note because it's
generally bumpy roads.
Yeah,
Generally bumpy roads. I don't think we need to get into too many more particulars about that, but generally, if it's a rough riding road, you got surface defects.
Yeah, and the reason that is important essentially is because if you identify those are roads that you can't simply resurface. They generally require a more extensive repair, or you're going to be back in the situation in 4 or 5 years. So this is a real world example from South Glengarry. This is King Street in South Lancaster, right by the wharf. And what has happened here, this is alligator cracking. So you can see how there's a network of cracking and it's started to lift out of the surface. And this has happened for one of two reasons. Poor drainage or unsuitable base material, usually a combination of both, but definitely poor drainage. And this would be an example where you could rip this out and replace the surface, but if you don't address the drainage issues, meaning putting in adequate ditching or storm sewer or some kind of way to get the water away from the roadway, you'll be back in the same situation in a couple of years. So one of the primary deliverables of this report was a 10-year asset management plan. So when we go through and do our initial ranking, it's purely data driven. We're looking at things like traffic volume, the existing condition, and the cost of the rehabilitation that would be necessary. And then, so that's what we do. We do our initial drive through. we get our data-driven values. These are the roads that should be rehabilitated in this given order. Then our process is always, we talk to the municipality, to the roads department, and we get feedback, because there are things that we can't always see or that we're not aware of that will impact the service level of the roads. And there are other factors such as the development of a township garage in the future, which I believe is going on Airport Road. That's going to increase the amount of heavy trucks that travel down that road. The existing asphalt that's on a portion of it is in good condition. However, we've added upgrade from surface treatment from gravel to surface treatment for one section of that road, because there will be an increase in truck traffic. Another thing is the rehabilitation of hamlets. The township has shown an initiative to rehabilitate several of the hamlets in their next 4 years, which they provided to us. And we feel that there's benefit in doing so. It's not always going to be borne out in the data, because they're generally lower traffic volume roads, but they do provide a great service to the town. They're highly residential. It's a pretty common initiative amongst municipalities to rehabilitate their hamlets. And yeah, and then another one that I have added in there is the reconstruction of Fraser Road adjacent to the bridge. I believe 2023, 2024 is when that's scheduled for the MTO to redo the bridge section. And the section that South Glengarry has that's beside it is in quite poor condition. So I'll just step through the first 4 years here, or the first 5 years, sorry. I won't go through the whole plan because, again, it would take quite a long time. As mentioned, there is some emphasis on rehabilitating the existing hamlets, specifically Lancaster Village. The northeast section was scheduled for this year. And then I've talked with Chris at some length about the Glendale Hamlet. Part of those roads are likely going to have to be moved to next year. Some of them, initially they're indicated for overlay. Some of them will require full depth repairs based on some of the developments over the winter. And then you'll see some other roads that are worked in there. And part of the approach here is that you could pick 2 to 3 roads and just redo those every year, and it would eat your whole budget because they need full repair. But those roads don't always have a high service level. They don't have high traffic volume. And accordingly, you can get more cost benefit from doing rehabilitations on roads that haven't actually gotten to the state where they need immediate repair. And it would be difficult, or it would be a greater cost to do so because they have that higher service level. And again, 2022, there's a section of Lancaster Village that is to be rehabilitated. If you look at the far right, and this is a question I had earlier, the surface upgrade section, all that is indicating is whether or not that is being improved from the previous surface that was there. And what I mean by that is if it was a gravel road and it's going to surface treatment with this improvement, it would be a surface upgrade. Or if it was surface treatment and it's going to pavement, it would be a surface upgrade. That's all that means. It doesn't mean that the road's not going to be better than before the work. It just means that it's moving up essentially a step in what the surface is. And there's reasons for that we'll get into. Again, 2023, you can see there's a couple of surface upgrades in there. There's a couple of sections of the Lancaster Village Hamlet. Obviously, it's a very large area, so it's something that needs to be rehabilitated over time. Wouldn't be, if you could do it all 1 year and it would eat your entire budget essentially. 2024, a couple of surface upgrades, and then just various roads that need repair. And then we get to 2025, which there are some roads that are discussed here. The section of Airport Road that the Township Garage will be located on or located adjacent to, section of Fraser Road that is going to be adjacent to the MTO bridge rehabilitation. And then I noted earlier in the presentation that generally all of the higher traffic volume roads in South Glengarry are in good existing condition. There's a few noted exceptions to that. Chapel Road, there's a section of that is at this time degrading, and it is one of the higher traffic volume roads. Generally, a high traffic volume road for South Glengarry is over 500 vehicles a day, which is overall not that high, but that's a high one based on the data that we have. So that's one that I've included as soon as it could possibly fit in there. And obviously it's a large section, takes up a lot of the budget. What the township might want to look at when they get to that point is doing it in smaller sections if they need to address other roads as well. You might do half one year, half the other year, because I think it's a 3-kilometer section. So I'll just walk you through some of the common rehabilitation methods that municipalities utilize. There's crack sealing, which during a review, we observed that there was quite an extensive amount of crack sealing done on some of the more major roads, which is good. It means the municipality already has a good crack sealing program. It will correct surface defects. I've got an approximate cost in there. It'll give you about 3 years on your road. These are, again, our approximate values based on data that we were able to pull. And then microsurfacing, surface treatment, those are things. Your road is generally in good condition. Maybe you fixed some minor issues through crack sealing. You're able to just essentially do an overlay of that existing surface, of that existing pavement surface. A pad and overlay, all that really means is you've got some issues where your cross section isn't perfect of your road, so you're adding little bits of asphalt to correct that, and then you're paving over top. And obviously, as these treatments get more extensive, the approximate service life extension goes up. And a few important things to note here: if you have any sign of base defects, like the alligator cracking that I pointed out before, you will want to do full depth reconstruction. You should always be assessing the drainage prior to, aside from maybe crack sealing, before doing any of this work, essentially because you're putting money into it. If the drainage is inadequate, you're going to be back there in a few years doing the same thing. And then some recommendations from the report that I want to touch on. Like I said earlier, the high volume roads are generally in adequate condition with good drainage, with few exceptions. And in those exceptions, they're generally not a base issue. It's just probably a wear over time thing, where they've kind of ridden out their service life and they're starting to get fatigue cracking and some other issues like that. The roads that have the high volume obviously sustain the greatest traffic loading. And again, when work is done, there really needs to be an emphasis on doing repairs the correct way, or doing rehabilitations the correct way, which starts with drainage, and your base material needs to be ensured that those are adequate. You get water away from your roadway to ensure that your investment is going to last. And then another thing is, like I mentioned at the start of this presentation, the assessment that we have done is a point assessment. It is one time driving the road. This is what we've seen. This is how it fits as per the manual. I recommend that the township review the road network annually, preferably in the spring. That's when you're going to see most of your damage from frost susceptibility, and road conditions will change over time, and the asset management plan should be changed to reflect that as conditions evolve. So here's an example of road cross section from one of our previous projects. I can just kind of show what I'm talking about in terms of providing adequate drainage, because there's a few things that go into this. And one is you want to have good slope from your center line away to the edges of your road. You don't want water to sit on your road. sometimes you'll see puddles that are occurring, and that's either because you've got depressions or you don't want to put crossfall or slope across your lanes. Another thing, and this is more of a maintenance thing that the townships can do, is ensuring that shoulders aren't capped. And like I said, that means if you drive by and you see all your shoulders have grass all the way up to the edge of the road, that's generally not good. That means organic material has gotten on top of your existing gravel shoulders, and that base material, the water can't spill out into the ditch because asphalt is semi-permeable and water does go through the asphalt and into your base material. And then once you get your water out there, another thing is just having appropriate ditching, getting water away from the road base and to the outlets, wherever they may be. And another thing that I highly recommend is that the township continue its existing traffic counting program and also extend it. I know that some of the counts that we got, which are all provided by the municipality, are estimates. It's important to try to get a traffic count on every road, starting with the major ones. Those determine the level of service. Townships will use the traffic volumes to prioritize things such as plowing, other kinds of maintenance, and it will let you know when surface upgrades are appropriate. And when I talked about surface upgrades earlier, there isn't a lot in the way of roads where we would look at it and purely from a traffic volume standpoint, we would say, you need to upgrade this road from surface treatment to asphalt. All of your higher volume roads are already asphalt. Where the surface upgrades come into effect is around 400 vehicles a day is generally when you start looking at changing gravel roads to surface treatment. And that is because at that point, the maintenance costs of maintaining that gravel road and grading it and adding gravel generally starts to become too much, and it's more economical to put that surface treatment down there. Surface treatment is expensive, but if you're maintaining gravel all the time, well, that's a cost you have to weigh against it, something you no longer have to do. So again, with the hamlets, the study data, the raw data especially, we're just going based on the numbers, and the traffic volume in these hamlets is always going to be low. It's not the only indicator of level of service though. They're obviously high population density areas, and it's a common thing with many municipalities. Many of the roads within the hamlets require drainage improvements and base repair related to the drainage, and a lot of them are just they're hamlets that were constructed a long time ago. They were paved and they've just kind of run out their service life. But we do see the value in that, and that's why they've been included in the report. And then, as I've touched on previously, gravel roads, surface treatment, common indicator for when you need to do this is 400 vehicles a day. That's just taken from design manuals, such as the TAC manual. It's an Ontario manual for road design. It's pretty common throughout the province that that's what you use. And if you were to, when you do get into paving and surface treating roads that are lower traffic volume, you start to see diminishing returns in terms of, reduced maintenance costs. And we have seen municipalities previously get into situations where they paved a road or surface treated a road, and then down the line, it didn't really save them much or provide that much of an increased level of service because the traffic volume was low. And now they need to repair the road, and it's a huge cost, and they're unable to do so or have to prioritize that over other things. And to be reviewed prior to upgrading any of these gravel roads, again, you have to ensure that there's adequate drainage, adequate base conditions, and an adequate cross section. Otherwise, there's no point in spending the money for surface treatment. You're going to be back in 3 years replacing it because it's all going to be cracked.
Rob, I just want to make one couple of quick points here before you get on to questions. In general, the township's roads are in great condition. The roads department pointed us where we need to go. They're very helpful. I mean, I've seen a lot of townships in the east, and South Glengarry is in good shape. Your drainage obviously is good, as per Rob's reporting. Your roads are in actually great condition. This document is also a long-term planning document for the township. In the application for grants, as we see it used a lot. So when you apply for Ontario grants, they often want to see this report that road section or village section is within your 5-year plan, and they'll ask to see that you're planning out to maybe afford to have that section of road done. This is a planning tool for that, where they'll ask for in your grant, and it helps in that application. And it's also a tool that it's not set in stone the next 5 years. It's just a suggested, here's your plan. There might be other circumstances that come up that, change the plan going forward, but it's a good start, and at least gives you some budgeting tools as a council going forward, just like to look and say, okay, here in the next 5 years is where all of my budget is going. And you can take that back to your constituents and say, okay, you're on the 5-year plan. It is in the radar, or you're not. Maybe you should go take a drive down the road and look at this road and compare it to yours, and compare the two and then come back. I've seen that done before also. But I think at this point, Rob did an excellent presentation for his first time in front of a council. If you didn't know, so he's a little nervous, but he did an excellent job. But if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. We're here. And we'll try to answer them as best we can individually. Now, certain road sections, why my road section is not on there compared to someone else's, you can maybe ask Chris about that after and send an email. We can look at it. But any general questions about the plan and how it's developed this would be the appropriate time.
I think one other thing I would add there, Kevin, is with regards again to the rehabilitation of the hamlets and the road upgrades that are on the 5-year plan. The reason the township has been afforded the ability to do that is really a credit to the road staff and the good condition that those major roads are in. Generally, when we do these studies, it's more of a, okay, what can we do in the next 10 years? Because there's a lot of high volume traffic roads that are degrading and need immediate repair. And that's not the case. So that is a credit to how the existing road infrastructure has been maintained.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Rob, can I ask you to take down the presentation? I just can't see all members of council, if that's okay with you.
Certainly. Just stop my screen sharing here. Stop share.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question, but I will go to Deputy Mayor Warden first.
Through Mr. Mayor, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. It's always good to keep track of where our roads are. At what point, so we had talked about just, if we got a grant and paved all of our roads, had every road in our municipality paved. At what point would you determine that it's not a wise investment? Like, what does it depend on? Amount of cars, amount of houses? It was just an idea floating around because Infrastructure Canada and Ontario are loaning money out at a really good rate, and with the cost of granulars and asphalt hot mix going up at a rate quite higher than inflation, was talked about maybe borrowing money and doing more. So, and I just thought that comment was, so at what point would it be a negative to actually pave a road? You could allude to that.
I can answer that. So this goes back to more in your long-term planning. Don't think of it as an asset. Think of it all as a liability. You're paving that road. You've got to go back and you've got to come up in reserves in 20 years or 15 years and now replace all those roads you've paved. And you're not going to have the capital to do at that point. And you're going to have to go back to your constituents and say, hey, sorry, you got to pave the road. You're getting gravel because don't have the money to do what we did 20 years ago. If you were to get grants more like that, I would say invest in your hamlets, what you're doing now. That's where your population centers are. But your problem is you're providing a level of service that your size of township will not be able to maintain in future years. So you're setting yourself up for not being able to replace that. Even if you did get that grant, the pavement's not going to last. It's going to last 20 years, 15 years. Maybe you get a bad year. bad winter where you get a 15-degree day and it rains and then it goes to -30. Maybe you just lost half of your investment at that point. You've put that's probably the worst condition for a road is to get that rain and then freezing. But if you were to do that, you're providing a service that you can't maintain in the long term, from my view, in a municipality. There's nothing saying that you can't do what you're suggesting, but it's just not good long-term planning that you'll be able to afford to maintain that cost of paving all the roads. You got to think of the crack sealing that's got to go on in 5 to 10 years, that budget, and then to replace it, even to pulverize it. You can very easily maintain a really bad gravel road by putting a grader on it. When you start patching asphalt roads, they don't really last, and you've got to pretty much repave it, and that costs a lot of money.
Subsequent, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's very, very good information. I guess, you like the idea of being able to provide that type of service, but what you're saying makes sense that we could be setting ourselves up for failure in the future. The other question that I had was, it slipped my mind. Oh yes, sorry. Every year you're proposing that we spend around the 1.5. Should that number be gradually going up over the next decade? Because I notice it's fairly consistent within 30, 20, 30, 40,000. Is that something that we should be slightly increasing, or?
Yeah, we've used the budgeting from, we worked with the township. Chris is very helpful saying this is your budget, but yeah, generally you guys are looking at a 2% increase each year for your inflation. I would assume I don't know, I don't read your council minutes for budgets, I don't pay taxes down there, but I would assume 2% is a fairly reasonable amount, and it depends also on the amount of growth you're going to have. Maybe some comes out of Cornwall or down from Ottawa, or you have some new subdivisions or something that pumps more money and some more ADT. But again, this is just a guide. 2% on 1.2 million. It's only for 5 years. You're going to have to redo this report. I believe the ministry stipulates every 5 years, 5 or 10 years. I'll have to get back to you on the exact number. But the ones we've done previously are starting to come for renewal, so this will be relooked at. But those aren't hard budget numbers. They're just a working number that we've worked with the township staff to come up with.
Okay, thank you very much for your information.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor Warden. I'll move to Councillor Jaworski, please.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. The first one is in the report near the end where you have the charts with the summary of road needs assessment with the priority and condition rating. The far right column is cost benefit value. Could you explain what that is, please?
Certainly. So that is just a tool that I've seen other municipalities use for asset management. I think I've shared the link with there's a website that calculates it, but there's a breakdown of the formula as well. I've shared that with the roads department. And what that takes into account is traffic volume, the cost of any improvement to that road, and the service life the service life extension that will provide. So essentially looking at it that way is how you're able to rehabilitate multiple roads in a given year versus a worst first approach, which would just be, these are our worst roads, not necessarily taking into account how much it's going to cost to fix them, what the existing level of service in terms of traffic volume is, and just doing those, and you do 2 to 3 roads a year, and that would be your budget. This allows you to, the idea is that you maintain an overall good quality of your road network by doing multiple roads, because there's a cost benefit to doing these treatments before the road completely fails. So that's all it is. It's a formula that takes into account traffic volume, cost of the rehabilitation measure that would be appropriate, and the service life of that extension that would provide. And also the existing condition of the road. That is the other factor.
Okay. So higher means it's better to work on this road, or is it lower means it's higher? Okay.
Higher, yes.
All right. My other question, if I may, Mr. Mayor, for the AADT, is that purely a count, or does it take into account the type of vehicles that are traveling? Like, for example, if we know that there's a road that has a lot of heavy equipment, does the ADT get, changed to reflect that the traffic on that road is actually much more, it's harder on the road?
No, that is something that information is something that the road staff would be aware of. The ADT is just a measure of the total amount of axles that go over that traffic tube. It's just the tubes that go across the road, and they feed into a little box mechanism. And it's just every time an axle goes over that tube, it puts a burst of air into the box, and it just counts those and divides them by 2 or 3 or whatever the factor is. So if you had a road where you knew there was a high volume of heavy vehicles, you can change the amount of bursts essentially that count as a vehicle, but generally it's 2. It's just counting passenger vehicles. So no, that doesn't take that into account. It's just purely traffic volume, number of vehicles per day.
Okay. Just my quick pass looking at those numbers, it seems like some of those numbers are a bit wonky. Like, it looks like in a lot of cases we just put 25 when 25 might not be accurate, but that's not your, if I understand, you just were a receiver of that data as opposed to having to have verified it. All
of the lower ones and likely most of the round numbers are estimates. And that's something that's pretty common with a lot of municipalities. Only the ones which are few and far between that have had that established traffic counting program will have numbers for every road, especially the ones that are just assumed to be lower volume. So yeah, there is a lot of estimates in there, and that's something that can be worked on going forward.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Jaworski. Any other members of council have any questions? Councillor Lang, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, guys. I'm curious about, like, when I'm looking at that picture of the road that you gave us from South Lancaster. I forget, it was King Street, Queen Street, whatever it was. And that sort of repair you're saying should be a complete repair, with the base and everything. But I'm curious as how long that lasted the way it was. If that was done 5 years ago or 3 years ago, because you're saying if we don't do a complete repair, we're only going to get 3 to 5 years out of it. Or was it done 30 years ago and we happened to get 30 years out of it the first time? In which case I would kind of assume maybe we might get more than 3 to 5 years this time. And the only reason I'm asking this is because it's pretty tough to tell residents that they have to live on a gravel road for the rest of eternity. While we're fixing up roads in Hamlets, there are people only have to drive a very short distance on them and putting great money into it. And I'm just wondering if there maybe is some way to kind of have something in between, where we keep the Hamlets from deteriorating further, but maybe don't spend a fortune on them and keep them in reasonable condition, but get some of our other residents onto a road that doesn't destroy their car.
So I'll answer this one, Rob. So unfortunately, generally when a road gets redesigned, if it fails, we're the first ones to get blamed as engineers. So if we were to suggest that to a township, particularly the image you've shown, we would be the first one to blame if we weren't done accurately. Now, in saying that, there is some as you get into the design of that particular street, there's more engineering you do. Geotechnical would be putting a bore machine in there. It cuts a hole, a core of the road, and it'll tell you what the base is like. It can give you a better idea of what's under the sub base. We can't see that from a visual interpretation. But I generally find the more money you spend up front, the prices, once you have the machinery there, digging the hole and putting the granular in, to put an extra, to do it right, to put the extra 6 inches or foot, the cost is not that incremental versus the lifespan. You're correct that it might have been there for 30 years. I'm not privy to that local information. It might have been there in the 60s. It might have been there since the early 2000s. That's where you have to rely on your road staff to have some more of that local knowledge. Your guys at the local garage will know, they'll remember. It is a balancing act, telling people they don't have to drive on gravel roads. But just to give you an idea, the city of Kingston is currently looking at downgrading some of their paved roads to asphalt in their rural sections. because they're having problems with the long-term maintenance. And they still have gravel roads with the capital budget they have. Surface treatment is an easy option if you have the high enough ADTs in a certain section you want to do. Pavement, I would not recommend, but that's almost a political question versus an engineering one, unfortunately.
And something I'd like to add to that is just, like Kevin said, we don't know how long that road was there before it ultimately failed, but it's a risk thing. And like Kevin said before, there are certain events or certain winners that can make those issues worse. So we would never recommend that you just put a patch on it, because there is a risk that you could have an event or some kind of situation like that where it would just go back to the same issue in short order.
Okay, thank you. I guess going on with Councillor Lang's comment, I think it's up to us to find out how long that road has been prior, I guess, when it was resurfaced the last time, and what kind of base we have underneath it, and that'd be up to us to make a decision at that point of how we want to move forward with it. But Councillor Jaworski, you have another comment or question?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's like, because we only just got this, it was today, right, that we got this report. So I'm wondering, like, in terms of next steps, because as I was looking through it this afternoon, like certain roads, like I think if I'm reading it correctly, like Heron Road is something that was brought up and, to look at, and it seems to be quite off into the distance. So if we have specific questions about why certain roads are further off into the distance and why some are earlier, is that something that we would, like, what's the next step with this report? Do we ask questions like that and there'll be some more follow-up, or is this the end of the process for Greer Consulting?
I think, and this is part of the discussion that we've had with Chris and the rest of the roads department during this project, that's something that you can funnel through them to us. Like Kevin mentioned, this will determine grant funding going forward. So if there are changes that need to be made just to the order of the roads and where they come up in the long-term plan, that's something we can discuss. And if it makes sense to everyone, we can move things around, but that's something that should go through. Discuss that with Chris, and then we can discuss that with them.
We're not going to go anywhere, but we will have to follow the process, send it to the roads department, but we'll be able to answer any questions that we think are technical in nature and support. But yeah, I'll have to go through the roads department for individual roads, I guess would be the correct answer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions for these two gentlemen? Not seeing none. I think he answered most of our questions this evening. So thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Rob, for your presentation this evening, and thank you for the report that you presented here this evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move right into new business, staff reports, 2021 budget and taxes. Mr. McDonald.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to share my screen and try and do what Vero does on so many occasions. Make a nice presentation for you. Can you see my screen all right?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Start on the last slide. So this is our, sorry, there we go. Our township budget. And this is just going to be a quick overview of what we have for you. We have the big capital items for everybody is the roads garage, the Williamstown Fire Hall, Second Line Road, and as you know, various hamlet roads. That was just somewhat discussed, and I thank Greer Galloway for their perspective on our budget and capital items that way. The big news for us, and I think it's the good news, is $290,000 decrease in our net levy requirement at the same time as reserve contributions were increased. That's somewhat unheard of. It's respectful to the current macro environment, being that there are some people, it's typically service workers who are suffering, so it's a nice time to deliver a decrease. And we're truly doing more with less with this budget. It is our first decrease since 1999, so that's a big item. We were younger then. And in comparison to the lower tiers of SDNG, if you look down, can you see my mouse moving around on this one? Okay, perfect. So It was in 2021, we actually are the only municipality with a decrease. I believe the counties on a $50 million budget went down 60 to 80,000. So for us to go down $290,000 is quite the accomplishment, in particular because we didn't cut services, we increased reserve contributions. Additional to this, with the MFOA, the Municipal Finance Officers Association, I don't know if there would be more than 5 municipalities in Ontario that have decreased their net levy requirement. So this is a big deal, and it is the first time that we are the lowest in terms of increases. In this case, the only person, or township, I should say, in the last 8 years in our local area to have a decrease. Other than that, I'll stop sharing my screen. The report is fairly housekeeping. We did our budget November 6th and 20th of last year. I recall from Councillor Jaworski mentioned that I had an obligation to Councillor Lang to put farm tax on our tax schedule. So that being said, I will prepare an info report for next meeting or the meeting after that with a little bit more about how it affects it. The $215,000 amount that we use as an average is a good household number, but it doesn't really compare perfectly to a farm lot or a commercial or an industrial lot. So I'll put a little effort in there and contact MPAC to get like an average farm or a typical commercial in our area so that I can compare that way, as well as I'll show you what the effects are on like 100,000 worth of assessment, because I think there's value in that. Otherwise, I'll leave it open to Mayor and Council if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. Any comments or questions? Deputy Mayor Warden?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would like to congratulate staff on bringing this forward. Council, I like to think we do a pretty good job with the tax dollars, and I appreciate the effort that was put in these unprecedented times. So well done, staff, and I'm very happy for this report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just to echo Deputy Mayor Warden's comments, Mr. McDonald, thank you very much. I was very pleased with the way the budget was done this year. It's a lot easier to add a few things here and there than it is to subtract, well, sometimes 10, 15% off the budget like we've done in the past. So kudos to you and the rest of the staff as well for all their hard work and all the cutting we asked for. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Jaworski?
Yeah. Echoing what my colleagues have said, excellent work done by staff to get us to this accomplishment, and I look forward to seeing how we closed off 2020 as well when we get the final counting of that, because I find that doing that's really helped us really narrow in on where are those items that we can keep trimming down, because it's going to be a challenge for next year as well. So thank you very much to staff, and keep up the great work.
Okay, thank you. I do echo my colleagues around the table, Mr. McDonald. So thank you to you and your staff and all the management team here at the township. Like Councillor McDonald said, that listen to council in regards to how we wanted to get the decrease down, and you certainly work together as a team with your leader as a CEO, making sure that the team worked together to get our numbers where council wanted them. So we appreciate that and we say thank you. And I'm sure our residents in South Glengarry will respect and appreciate exactly what the staff done and council done for 2021. So thank you for that. I do have a motion moved by Councillor Jaworski, second by Lyle Warden. Be resolved that staff report 48-2021 be received, and that bylaw 23-2021 being a bylaw to adopt the estimates of all sums required during the year and to adopt the tax rates for the year 2021 be read a first, second, third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council the 6th day of April 2021. If there's no further questions or comments, all in favor of the motion? The motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. And we'll move to number 2 is the Ontario Fire Marshal's Fire Safety Grant. Chief Robertson.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, and on March 11th, the Solicitor General of Ontario and the Ontario Fire Marshal announced a one-time funding opportunity to address fire department training constraints incurred due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So under their fire safety grant program, South Glengarry is eligible to receive $7,800, so $7,800. to support staff training, or to acquire tools that would assist with virtual occupancy inspections. Over the past year, with our limited in-person training opportunities due to physical distancing and the like, much like the rest of society, we, both fire staff and township staff, have conducted a number of our training opportunities in a virtual or an online format. This has worked out very, very well for certain trainings. The one limitation that many of our staff have would be technology, would be the availability of computers, laptops, etc. So fire administration is proposing that we set up what we will call a computer lab, not necessarily a facility, but a stock of technology, of laptop computers or similar devices and associated accessories that would allow our staff either to attend as a group to fulfill virtual or online training opportunities, or devices that we can lend out as needed, both to fire staff. That's in essence what this this training, this funding opportunity is for the fire service, but we feel it's only proper that we share it with other municipal staff to allow them to use the facilities and equipment. So part of this request and the requirement from this funding opportunity, and due to the March 31st Ontario budget deadline or the end of their fiscal year, we had to send in a notice of our intention, or first of all, our interest, and then our intention of what we would spend the funds on. That letter and the subsequent documents are attached to the agenda tonight. So this staff report, in essence, is requesting council, it's our recommendation, but we're also requesting council's approval that we would spend the grant money, the value of $7,800, to purchase technology to assist with remote staff training and online learning. So any questions, I'd feel to be more than happy to answer.
Okay, thank you, Chief Robertson. Any comments or questions from members of council? I've not seen none. I think it's a great suggestion in regards to what you're looking to purchase, Chief Robertson, so that it can continue if there's that opportunity for online training, that the opportunity is there. So not seeing no comments or questions, I do have a motion moved by Martin Lang, second by Lyle Warden. Be resolved that staff report 49-2021 be received, and that the council of the Township of South Glengarry accepts the fire safety grant of $7,800 with the intent to purchase technology to assist with remote staff training, and furthermore, that the fire chief and clerk be authorized to sign all relevant documents. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chief. And we'll move to number 3 is the Mccullough zoning bylaw amendment. Mrs. Haley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll highlight a few items in my staff report. So this property is located east of the village of Martintown on the north side, addressed at 18803 County Road 18. It is currently residentially developed, and the applicant proposed to rezone the subject property from rural to exception 15 to permit the development of a private school that will be operated as either accessory to the existing single detached dwelling or within a detached structure. So we've gone through the required process under the Ontario Planning Act, and you will see in my staff report that the proposed private school conforms to various sections of the provincial policy statement, as well as the official plan. And they're able to meet other components of the zoning bylaw, such as parking. We held a public meeting on March 15th, 2021. We notified all the abutting property owners within 120 meters, as well as placed an ad in the Glengarry News. And we received no written or formal comments from any members of the public. The United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry Roads Department was circulated because this property fronts on County Road 18. I have included their comments within the staff report. And at this point, they're not objecting to the proposed rezoning. However, they have identified concerns with the development's impact to the safe and efficient movement of traffic on County Road 18. And the county is recommending that because of the location of the existing residential driveway relative to a curve, the county would prefer to see the construction of a separate entrance. The applicant would also prefer this, and the applicant is currently working with the United Counties and through their new entrance permit to be able to see if they can achieve the requirements of the county. And the county would also permit them to install a sign permit subject to, to install a sign subject to a county sign permit. So as you recall, we are required to make decisions for zoning amendment applications within 90 days as prescribed by the Ontario Planning Act. And if council chooses to approve this evening, we'll be making a decision on day 66. It is being recommended that council approve the zoning bylaw amendment simply because it conforms to the provincial policy statement and the official plan. And we look forward to seeing if council will approve this to see if we could have this type of new use in our community. So I'd be happy to answer any questions if council has any.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Haley. Deputy Mayor Warden.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I think, you know what, if an individual wants to open a private school, I see no reason why we would prevent that from happening. They seem to be going through the proper channels to make it happen. So I'm 100% in favor of proceeding forward and allowing them to take it to the next step.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Warden. I do agree with you 100%. It's not our decision to make as long as it fits the criteria in regards to what the municipality is looking for, and it's their decision respective to operating in that private school. Is there any other questions or comments? Not seeing none, please bear with me. I have a motion moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Sam McDonnell. Be resolved that staff report 50-2021 be received and that bylaw 25-2021 being a bylaw to amend bylaw 38-09, the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the Township of South Glengarry for a portion of the property legally described as part of Lot 33, Concession 1, NRR in the geographic Township of Charlottenburg, now in the Township of South Glengarry, in the County of Glengarry, also known as 18803 County Road 18, to rezone the southern portion of the subject property from rural to rural exemption 15 to permit the development of a private school that will be operated as an accessory use either within the existing single detached dwelling or within a detached structure, be read a first, second, third time, passed, signed, and sealed in open council the 6th day of April 2021, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry confirms that all comments received from the public were carefully and respectfully considered. However, they had no effect on the decision to approve this zoning amendment. Any other comments or questions? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you, Mrs. Haley. And number 4 is the XL Wood Products deferral of site plan control and exception of half road restrictions. We have Mrs. Haley and Mr. LeBlanc. Mrs. Haley, I believe you will start.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we're all aware that XL Wood Products main building was unfortunately destroyed by fire on November 21st, 2020. The property owner, Mr. Pasquez, would like to move forward with redeveloping the site to get his business up and running and has a few processes and requirements to go through in order to achieve this. On Monday, March 1st, a meeting was held on site at the XL Wood Product location with our CAO, Mr. Mills, Fire Chief Robertson, our former CBO who recently retired last week, Gary Poupart, as well as our mayor. And the purpose of this meeting was to discuss some options that Mr. Pasquez could have in moving forward with his development. In order to rebuild, there's different requirements, both provincially and locally, that he's required to meet. For example, when you're redeveloping or developing a industrial or commercial property, you are required to meet stormwater management guidelines from the Ministry of Environment. And we also have a site plan control bylaw for any property that is zoned industrial, institutional, commercial, or multi-res requires site plan control approval. Mr. Pasquez would like to move forward on a temporary basis to get his business back up and running, his employees back to work, and for that reason has proposed a temporary structure. And our chief building official has reviewed this and indicated that he can support this. If we move forward with this temporary structure, in the meantime, we're looking to request to council to defer the site plan control requirements locally to allow him to construct this building and then take the time that's needed to go through site plan control. When you're involved in government agencies outside of the municipality, site plan control can often take up to 6 months. And Mr. Pasquez has retained a local engineering firm, LaSalle Engineering, as well as a surveyor to pick up the topographical components on his site in order to get started. But we're realizing that firms are really busy now with COVID, a lot of developments happening, and his site plan approval is not going to come quickly, both from the design stage as well as ministry approval, and then of course South Glengarry approval. So for that being said, we are recommending to council that given these circumstances, we need approvals to defer the site plan control approval process, and actually have requested council to consider deferring this until May 1st of 2022 to give the developer a year to get his approvals in place. I'd like to turn over the staff report now to Mr. LeBlanc, who would speak to the request for exemption of half-load restrictions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Haley. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So at the March 1st, 2021 council meeting, Mr. Pasquez presented to council and requested the restriction of half-loads to be removed from County Road 34 to XL Wood Products location, which is approximately 1 kilometer east of Green Valley. So this section of Concession Road 8 is not designed or built to accommodate full load traffic in spring season. Council can direct staff to consider the rehabilitation portion of Concession Road 8 in the future.
We asked him to start over. He glitched and I didn't hear half of what he said. Pardon me.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, can you start after when you said it's 1 kilometer east of Green Valley?
Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you.
Okay.
The section of Concession Road 8 in question is not designed or built to accommodate full load traffic during the spring season. Council can direct staff to consider the rehabilitation of this portion of Concession Road 8 in the future budget and incorporate it in the road needs study, or can repair the road as needed. So if council wishes to exempt the half-load restrictions on County Road 8, or excuse me, Concession Road 8 between County Road 34 and XL Wood Products located at 20473 Concession Road 8, it is recommended that council consider the damages to the road that may occur. The township can either absorb all the costs for the damages that may occur, or the township can charge back all damages to XL Wood Products. It is recommended that an agreement be entered with XL Wood Products and the Township of South Glengarry to clearly state permissions granted, timeframe, and responsibility of damages to the roads. Administration is requesting direction from council whether to absorb the cost or charge back costs to XL Wood Products for the repair of the roadway, and to prepare an agreement between the Township of South Glengarry and XL Wood Products. I'm glad to take any of your questions.
Thank you. I do have a question for you, Mr. LeBlanc, before I go to the rest of the members of council. Did the gentleman ever state, or Mrs. Haley state, in regards to how many trucks per day go down that road from his business to Highway 34? Do we have that number? I'm just wondering how much activity is on that road in that one section between XL Products and County Road 34.
Mr. Mayor, I could take a minute to take a look at Mr. Pasquez's written request that he provided a couple of council meetings ago to see if that was indicated in that letter while you further discuss the staff or further discuss the request. I'll just take a minute to take a look at that.
Okay, I'll move to another question and I'll come back to you, Mrs. Haley, in respect to that. Deputy Mayor Warden, I hope it's for Mr. LeBlanc because Mrs. Haley's busy.
Yeah, it's more of a question or a comment. I'm in full support of deferring the site plan control. I think we have to work with our local businesses in this, especially in this environment. So I'm 100% in favor of that. The second part of the staff report in regards to the half loads, I'd be fine waiving it for this year. But I think long term, we definitely need to spell out exactly what we're willing to accept. And I think there needs to be a bit of a further discussion between staff and the XL Wood company, what they're willing to do. Because I don't feel 100% that it should be all on us, but I don't feel that we should also leave them hanging either.
Okay, thank you. No, I agree with you. That's why I was trying to get those answers in regards to the traffic, how much traffic we have on there. But two things we have to remember is one, it's a fair sized business that we have in our municipality. We certainly don't want to lose that. And number two is I agree. I think he needs to take responsibility in some of the costs there too, because it's unfortunately his business that's causing more damage to the road. But again, it's not all his equipment that's damaging the road over a period of time. So we have to take some responsibility there also. Mrs. Haley, I'm not sure if you have that answer for us or if it was in that report or not.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I read the letter, and Mr. Pasquez does not provide the details. He just indicates that it's important for the business to not have the exemption to allow for deliveries. But that's certainly something that Mr. LeBlanc and I can look into as well.
Okay, thank you. So we're going by what Deputy Mayor Warden said. Can we accept one part of this motion this evening and ask for further, I guess, further information in respect to the half loads? Mr. LeBlanc, do you have any contact with Mr. DeHaan in respect? Our conditions of our roads or our properties at the moment are very dry, so I'm not sure, is he lifting that half load sooner than the middle of May, or do you know that?
I do not know that at this time, Mr. Mayor. I know with the dry weather, usually and historically, it's usually around May 1st, but with the drier weather, it could be lifted sooner, but I can reach out to Mr. DeHaan and we can discuss it.
Okay, so how long, if we decide this evening to temporarily remove it for the balance of 2021, how long does that process take for us to remove that restriction? And then we can get more information for the longer term, I guess, for years after this. But if we decided to allow it to be temporary or done for 2021, how long is that process?
I can comment to that, Mr. Mayor,
Sure.
if you don't mind.
Right.
If council's in agreement tonight to defer it for 2021, and the clerk can help me out here in case I'm saying something incorrectly, but I believe you could simply pass a resolution that would direct staff to exempt it, and a letter could be granted or authorized or written to XL Wood Products granting that. And then that would afford time for administration to research the truck volume, the construction schedule, and it would allow us then to come back with a comprehensive agreement.
Okay, thank you. I would certainly support Deputy Mayor Warden's request to defer the second part of this motion to get more information in regards to how many trucks and so on and what kind of agreement we're going to come in with XL Wood Products. And I would have no issue supporting removing the half loads for 2021. So Council, I'll get back to that. Maybe Madam Clerk, if you can start a motion in regards to that request, if you would, please. And I'll go to Councillor Jaworski, if you would.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, so I'm glad to hear that staff has found a way to help Mr. Pasquez, work temporarily prior to getting, everything in place for a more permanent structure. But, let's, building on what's already been said about the, for this portion of Concession Road 8, I mean, I have no sense of what kind of costs are we looking at here in terms of the damage that might be done. And I think, we need to have a better sense of that, as well as Mr. Pasquez needs to have an idea of that, particularly if we're going to be asking him to cover a portion of that, because that might figure into his future plans as well. So I think we need that fairly quickly. I know Ms. Haley said it'll give staff some time, but it's still, I think time is of the essence on that point as well, too, to have that information quickly.
Yeah, no, I think we can get that pretty quickly, but if we allow the exemption for 2021, then it gives us kind of that full year to get a plan in place or an agreement with Excel Products before 2022, I guess is. Okay, Councillor Lang.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Yes, I'm in agreement with that. I have no problem with giving them the exemption. It's only going to be for another 3 weeks, likely 4 weeks at the most. And I suspect that there's an odd full load truck going down that road already. You know, these plants have to, you know, it's good to have the proper things in place, but these plants have to keep going, and likely there's an odd truck sneaks down there that we don't know about. So it's likely not going to do a lot more damage than they're doing now. And that gives us a year to kind of figure out something to put something proper in place. So I would give him the first part for sure to get his project underway, and then I would just give him the 1 year on this, and we'll come up with something for next year.
Okay, I agree. And no other questions or comments? Oh, Councillor McDonnell, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I agree with everyone else as far as that goes. The only thing I would like to see is if we do continue this, that there is a formal agreement, and I'd like to see if it's possible to tie it to the property itself. Just as far as whether that business ever changed hands, if it's tied to the property. And I for sure think if we are going to sacrifice parts of that road going further past 2021, we should expect some kind of compensation for that. I know we have lost businesses in the past. One I can think of on the Glen Road that moved out of the township for a more favorable spot on a full load road. But just to see that if we are going to do this, it's not that long a distance, and there should be a dollar figure attached to that for the property owner.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Combo, we have kind of a two-part motion here with me this evening. Can I scratch out the second part and just stop where it's approved by May 1st, 2022?
So, sorry, go ahead.
And I was just wondering if you had another motion in regards to.
So I'm amending the original motion. So the first part will remain the same. And I've amended the second part. So what I can do is read that back to you. And if it's as council would like it, since we're not in the same room, I can read the motion in its entirety on your behalf, and you can call for a vote.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. So for the second portion of that resolution, I've amended it to read, and furthermore, that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry approves an exemption to half-load restrictions on Concession Road 8 between County Road 34 and 20473 Concession Road 8 to permit full load truck traffic to support the business known as XL Wood Products for 2021. Now, I'm not sure if you want me to add anything to that regarding administration seeking more information for next year.
No, I don't personally think we need to. I think that's pretty much what council's request to Mr. LeBlanc is. So he'll work on that for 2022. And I mean, if we don't get that information before 2022, we certainly don't make that exemption by that point, right? So, but
sorry. So if you want me to read the revised resolution in its entirety, I just need to know the mover and seconder on the resolution.
Yeah, it's moved by Martin, second by Lyle, but I just want to make sure council was okay with that part of the motion. I see heads being shaken. Yes. So if you want to read the whole motion, go ahead. Sure. Sorry. And that was moved by Martin Lang and second by Deputy Mayor Warden. Okay. Moved by Councillor Lang, seconded by Deputy Mayor Warden. Be it resolved that staff report 51/2021 be received, and that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry permits the deferral of the site plan control approval process for XL Wood Products located at 20473 Concession Road 8, Green Valley, due to a devastating fire, and to permit the issuance of a building permit, providing that the site plan control process and agreement is approved by May 1st, 2022. And furthermore, that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry approves an exemption to half-load restrictions on Concession Road 8 between County Road 34 and 20473 Concession Road 8
to permit full load truck traffic to support the business known as XL Wood Products for 2021.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? Not seeing none. All in favor of the motion? Okay, thank you. It's carried. Thank you, Mrs. Haley and Mr. LeBlanc, for working with the gentleman from XL Wood Products. It's certainly something we want to try and do as a municipality, is work with our local residents and local businesses. So thank you for doing that. And Mr. LeBlanc, we look forward to a new report coming back from you in the future in regards to an agreement with the exemption of half loads on that concession 8, I guess, between 34 and his property. So, okay, thank you. We will move to number 5, the peanut line master plan. So we have Dave and Joanne. This is the plan that we discussed at the last special council meeting, and it was decided that we would move forward. So I'll hear from Mr. Robertson and Mrs. Haley, if you would please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just to recap your last statement. So on March 15th, at the regular council meeting, council received staff report 41, 2021, which requested council's approval to prepare a request for proposal for the development of a peanut line master plan. So the study of the future of the peanut line. After some discussion, council decided to defer that motion, that staff report, to the future so that we could come back with some additional information. So on the March 30th of this year, last week, at our special council meeting, staff presented council with some additional information on the topic, both on the peanut line and on the peanut master plan. And following those discussions, council directed administration to bring the deferred resolution, the resolution from the March 15th meeting. So requested that staff report be brought forward, that resolution, and we're doing that this evening. So just in recap, from an impact on the 2021 budget, the request is for a peanut line master plan that will cost approximately $40,000. That would be the upper limit. And it's requested that this amount be transferred from general reserve to the recreation and facility budget. So I'll pass, any questions of council, I'd be happy to answer.
Okay, thank you. I will move to Councillor Lang and then Councillor McConnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. Thank you, Mr. Robertson, for the report, or bringing back the report. I still, as everyone knows, have some reservations about this. I may not end up being in favor, but I do have a question. Were we going to see something else before this was awarded? Like when you put this out, are we going to see the scope of the work? Or I would think we talked about that a little bit. I'm just not sure where that ended. And if there is a next step, or the next step is just going to be us seeing the final report.
Chief Robertson.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the comment, Councillor Lang. So the discussion at the last meeting was that we would proceed with an RFP for the Recreation Master Plan. And prior to awarding the proponent of that RFP, the details would be in that staff report at that time for council to evaluate, to ensure that everything that all council's wishes were within that RFP.
Can I
go ahead, Councillor Lang?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if I'm understanding that, then we are approving tonight to go ahead and apply, like ask someone to do this plan for us, but we will still have an opportunity if we're not happy with what is brought forward to turn it down at that point.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, that would be the exact, my understanding of how the process of this event would work.
All right, I might be able to support that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think that's what we were looking for. That was our previous comments, I guess, at our last special council meeting last week. So Councillor McConnell, if you would please.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. No questions, I guess, just at this point, just a comment that I still don't support this. I think we're wasting valuable taxpayer dollars. I think all of council got the pictures and the video from Chief Robertson on some of the work that we have been doing. I think we'd be more wise to spend this money on that. I know the comment keeps coming up that, this might be helpful if we were to go for a grant in regards to being successful with a grant or getting money from the province or feds. But I think at this point, we know what we have to do to get to the point where we should be going and maybe improving it to a greater extent. I think this money could be better spent in brushing aggregates and grading the surface as it is now, and as opposed to going to a study. Anyways, thank you.
Okay, thank you. We had long discussion at our last council meeting. I'll go to one more quick comment or question from Councillor Jaworski, then I'll go to a vote because we went through this pretty lengthily at the last council meeting, our last special council meeting last week. Councillor Jaworski, if you would.
Sure. Thank you through you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Chief Robertson for sharing some photographs of the work that has been done on the peanut line already. We did put about $100,000 in the 2021 budget to do, the brushing and the resurfacing. And I think that's a good first step. But and that's a small step. And before we put more money, because it could potentially be a much larger price tag to do more work on the peanut line, I look at this as really an opportunity to understand what our residents want. I look at this as a public, engagement exercise, public consultation to understand what do our residents want from this line, and then that'll help inform what we need to do going forward. And they might, bring forth some real, ideas where in certain areas we don't need to put a lot of money, and maybe in other areas we do. But it really comes down to what our residents want, and I think this is the best way to find out because we don't have the resources internally to do that work at this point. So I will support moving this forward, but I do hope that we can bring the cost a little down because, $40,000 is more than I would like to pay, but if that's what it has to be to get this kind of work done, then that's what it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I do have a motion moved by Lyle Warden, second by Stephanie Jaworski. Be resolved that staff report 52-2021 be received and that the council directs administration to prepare a request of proposal for the development of a peanut line master plan, and furthermore that the treasurer be directed to transfer $40,000 from the general reserve to the 2021 recreational and facilities budget. You heard the motion. All in favor of the motion? And opposed? And the motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Chief Robertson. And we'll go to other business, the electronic signature platform. Mrs. Campo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you. This evening, Council, I have this information report before you, which discusses administration's intent to move forward with the use of an electronic signature platform. As we all know, the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way, not only the way the township does business, but pretty well most or many businesses as well. And we've identified the need for this platform for a number of reasons, which, the reasons and benefits are outlined in my report, so I won't get into those too much. But the main purpose of my report is the attachment, which is a draft policy for the use of electronic signatures. With the introduction of a new, I don't know if service is the right word, but we're implementing a new technology. So we want to have a policy to govern that. So there's a draft policy attached to the report. And it's just before you tonight for information and review purposes. If you do have any comments or suggestions, I'm happy to receive them tonight, or I believe that the date I have on the report is by April 12th, so that I can bring the policy back to our April 19th meeting. If I don't receive any additional comments or feedback, I'll bring it back as is. And aside from that, I do want to thank our executive assistant, Crystal Lebrun. She did a lot of the research on the different platforms last year while I was off, and really helped to narrow down our choice. So thank you to Miss Lebrun. And subject to any questions, that's my report.
Okay, thank you. I'll move to Deputy Mayor Warden. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Kelly, thanks very much for this report. This has been a long time coming. I've been using electronic signatures for my regular job since 2018, the first of the year. I have never had any issues with it, and it certainly is helpful for the environment, as my paper, I've reduced my paper by about 98%. So it's really good, and I'm happy to see this coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I agree 100%. Ms. Campo, did you say you were looking for comments prior to April 12th? Is that the date? I didn't hear the date.
Yes, I believe that is Monday. So just in terms of getting reports ready for the April 19th agenda, it's a fairly short policy. So if you have any comments, if you need more time, that's fine too. But if I don't hear anything, I'll just bring it back as it is in draft form.
Okay, so if any members of council have comments or questions, I guess more comments, I suppose, in regards to any changes you want to see in the report, please have it to Mrs. Campo by April the 12th. If not, it'll be coming back at the next council meeting, hopefully for approval at that point. So thank you, Mrs. Campo, and we'll expect that back on April the 19th.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll move to the two additions under other business. Is number 4 is the letter Ontario Recreation Facilities Association. Councillor Lang, you requested that. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Yes, just noticed that the Ontario Recreation Facility Association had sent this letter out, thanking municipalities and the staff that for, a pretty tough year in the recreation department. So I just wanted to bring it forward and say thanks to our staff. I know they were likely very disappointed that they were not able to do what we would normally do and provide the services we normally provide. But I think we appreciated what they did do, and the extra effort and everything they had to go through, especially with cleaning and all this sort of stuff. So just a chance to say thank you to, Chief Robertson taking over partway through, and all our staff for everything they've done.
Okay, thanks to Councillor Lang. We appreciate that. And that would be echoed across all members of council. Chief Robertson. Okay,
Yes,
thank you. And sorry.
Oh, sorry, through Mr. Mayor, just on behalf of all our rec staff, thank you for your comments.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move to number 8, resolution on carbon tax, town of Plimpton, Wyoming. Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess just a few comments I wanted to make coming from the industry. The carbon tax has a large impact on Ontario farm families. Since they're unique in the way they market their goods, farms are paying the carbon tax to the input companies that provide them seed and fertilizer. They also pay the carbon tax to dry their crop, and they also pay the tax again on the fuel required to plant, harvest, and get it to market. Yet farms only have a very little control over the markets they use, because they're at the mercy of the world markets and no avenue to pass along the tax to the consumer that takes it from there. Unlike the wholesalers that or the retailers they purchase their product from, and the people that sell their product at retail price to the consumers in the grocery store. So I guess just to sum it up, I'll just add to a famous quote: the farmer buys everything at retail, sells everything at wholesale, pays the freight both way, and now is going to pay the carbon tax both way. And it doesn't seem fair. Somewhere in there should be a break. So I'd like to see this supported, or at least sent to our Ag Committee for consideration.
Okay, thank you. Any Deputy Mayor Warden, if you have a question or a comment to Mr. McDonnell?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I have no issue supporting this. I personally don't agree with the carbon tax. I don't believe that Canadians should be paying a tax to heat their home in the middle of winter. I mean, we don't need to debate it on and on, but I would support bringing this back. And also, I like the idea of forwarding it to the Ag Committee for more feedback from them. Thank you.
Okay. So the motion out here tonight, Deputy Mayor Warden, are you seconding the motion? So the motion is to, I'll read the motion, and if there's any further questions or comments, we'll ask them at that point. So I have a motion be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry supports North Fork County Agricultural Advisory Board's letter regarding the application to carbon tax on primary agricultural producers. That the federal government be urged to consider the concerns of the agricultural community and move to exempt all primary agricultural producers from current and future carbon taxes. And furthermore, that the resolution be sent to North Fork County Council, MP Eric Duncan, the Honorable Jonathan Wilkinson, Minister of Environment and Climate Change, and the Honorable Mary Claude Bevo, Minister of Agricultural and Agri-Food. So is that the motion that you would be willing to second, Deputy Mayor Warden?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions from other members of council? Councillor Lang, if you would please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Yes, I'll support this as well. I think part of the issue the farm community has with this is that we don't have a lot of alternatives. We don't have electric tractors that we could go to instead of, burning diesel. We can't dry our corn or our grain in any other way other than, so we're basically being taxed to try to, I guess the purpose of this tax is to try to stop people using this fuel, but we have no alternative. So there's no way for us to get away from it at this point. Maybe that technology will come along someday, but it's not here yet. So we're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And as Mr. McCullough said, very hard to pass on because, our corn, beans and so forth are priced on the world market. And if the other countries aren't doing it, we're kind of, if everybody did it at once, we'd likely be fine with it. But the way it is now, we're kind of isolated. So I'll support this. And if it wants to go to the Ag Advisory Committee, we had talked about also sending another item or two there. So it would be time to call the meeting soon. Maybe we could get one in before spring work.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jaworski.
I would definitely be interested in hearing what the Ag Committee has to say. On this one. This is something that most of the customers I work with, this is a very large cost to them, and so I'd like to understand how the ag industries how they perceive it, that it's different on them than it is on some of these other industries. So I'd really be interested in that feedback.
Okay, thank you. So we can ask staff to bring that back to our Agricultural Committee, but Councillor Jaworski, are you, okay with supporting this to go off to the Minister of Agricultural and the Minister of Environment and Climate Change?
I'll be honest, I don't really know enough about the topic, truthfully, to understand how, why this industry versus another industry when it comes to the carbon tax, but I'm not going to oppose it. I don't know enough about this topic.
Okay, thank you. But we'll ask for more information to come back from our local Agricultural Committee in regards to more of an update and more information in regards to why they should be exempt, I guess is the question. Okay, so you heard the motion. It was moved by Sam McCullough and it was seconded by Deputy Mayor Warden. All in favor of the motion? The motion is carried. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor McCullough. We'll move to number 8, which is unfinished business. And let me just grab that.
Mr. Mayor, before you move into unfinished business, we do have a resolution to approve the committee reports and for information only items.
I apologize. Yes, I have it. I have a motion moved by Sam McCullough, second by Martin Lang. Be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry accepts the items presented on the agenda of committee reports and for information purposes only. You heard the motion. All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Campo. And under unfinished business, we have corporate services, docks on township property. Mr. Mills.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor, through you. So we're almost there with the owners of the lots in Glen Welcher. There's one still outstanding, and we've tried many different ways to get a hold of them. So we'll continue with that. That being said, working closely with Chief Robertson and staff, looking at options for the waterfront there with the park area that we own. And we'll be coming back with a staff report in the very near future to council for some options to consider. And we think it's a pretty good area for parkland, and exciting some of the things we can do there.
Okay, thank you. And the municipal servicing from the city of Cornwall.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I was in contact along with our consultant EVB with all of the landowners along Boundary Road, so that's complete now. So we have feedback from them. I also will be part of the steering committee meeting tomorrow with you and Councillor Lang, and I'll update the committee then we'll bring it back to council. I'm also in communication with the CEO of the city of Cornwall, and we're still trying to get a meeting there. So you know that we're pushing on that, and but the file's moving along now.
Okay, great, thank you. And I'll move to financial services, water rates and water bill design. Mr. McDonald.
Okay, thank you. I see that the clerk expected the best out of me because I think I had in brackets, if not on this report, April 19th. So that water rates is drafted. It's in the April 19th meeting. So that will be forthcoming based on the feedback from Councillor McDonnell and Councillor Jaworski. The letter's still with VADM. There's no update. And then with the LED streetlights, we sent a letter via the CAO to Cornwall Electric. And just on the electricity side of things, and somewhat unrelated, is I have had time to review the Hydro 1 side, and with our LED savings, there will be a report on first meeting of May regarding potential savings there to the customer.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mills. I'm not sure if you can answer this question or not, but the letter we sent to Cornwall Electric, I guess, did we give them a deadline in regards to replying, or, I mean, obviously we are advising them that if we don't hear back from them, we're going to take the next steps. I don't know if we have
Mr. Mayor, you know I like deadlines, right? So at the end of April, we set a date for response.
Okay.
In consultation with Treasurer McDonald, then that's why we're bringing the report back in May, so that they will coincide.
Okay, no, that's fair. I just want to make sure there is a date for them to reply to us. Councillor McDonnell.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Everybody knows my opinion on this one. I've been, I think, a little bit vocal on how I feel. I was just wondering, and I don't know if this is for open session or not, do we have a plan for next steps if we don't hear, like we have not heard in the past so many times, from Cornwall Electric?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would anticipate, based on the structure and the content of the letter, that we'll get a response. If we don't, we have a plan.
Good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mills and Mr. McDonald. And I'll go to fire services, fire protection ponds, Chief Robertson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, there's no update. I might request or suggest and then request of council that this item, just due to current workload with some of our larger projects just coming online right now, this may actually be pushed a month or two. I can ask of council that be permitted. So.
Okay, thank you. Any comments or questions? Not seeing none. Thank you, Chief Robertson. Okay, I do have a motion moved by Stephanie Jaworski, second by Sam McDonnell. Be resolved that the Council of the Township of South Glengarry convene to close session at 8:42 p.m. to discuss the following items under Section 239 of the Municipal Act. A meeting or part of the meeting may be closed to the public if the subject matter being considered is proposed or pending acquisition of disposition of land. Staff Report 53-2021. I'll ask for a vote. All in favor of the vote? The motion is carried. I will step away from the closed session at this present time. I'll ask Deputy Mayor Warden to take over in regards to that, and Madam Clerk can let me know